Welcome to this week's International Society for System Sciences mini symposium. This week we're going to hear from Professor Amar Nayak, who's going to give us a talk on regenerativeness, philosophical and methodological underpinnings. I'm really looking forward to this, Amar, and thank you so much for doing this for us.
Thank you, Gary. It's a great pleasure to come back again after about a year to share a very important concept of regenerativeness and the foundation for subsequent building of regenerative systems or ecosystems. What I'm going to do is primarily focus on the philosophical and methodological underpinnings. But we came into this thought of this seminar or symposium largely because of a book that was published in August 2024. That's called The Regenerative Ecosystems in the Anthropocene. So I'm going to first build the philosophical and methodological underpinnings before taking you to the framework and then the book. So that's the structure I thought of. I try to do that in, let's say, around 30, 40 minutes. And I would request Gary to just let me know around 20 minutes so that I try to close it so that we have time to discuss more. So the first part would be, of course, to look at the very basis of this ISSS. The second is to look at the methodology of thinking, doing, and living. So research is just about maybe mostly thinking. It doesn't get much into practice. And then we don't even connect it to our lives. So, but the importance of finding a methodology which has coherence across thinking, doing, and living. That's something that I would share. And then, of course, from these two, the philosophy and methodology, I'll try to give you the framework of the ISSS for a regenerative ecosystem. And then basically drive it down to saying that the book is a manifestation of these regenerative ecosystem designs in different ecosystems. So that's the broad structure of today's sharing or seminar. So coming first to the first part of what is ISSS or the philosophy behind it. So there are four axioms. The first three are natural axioms, that is interconnectedness, interdependence, and interactions. The fourth one is also an axiom, but that's the only degree of freedom that we have as human beings in any ecosystems. And the philosophical foundation of human engagements would arise from understanding how this intentionality is formed and how it shapes our collective actions. So that's the four things. But what we're going to do then is look at how we derive a methodology based on this philosophical understanding and how this methodology, called the STAR or ecosystemic transdisciplinary action research, can be explained, or the ontology, epistemology, logic, and axiology of this methodology is drawn from ISSS. So ontology, when we talk about that, we see the change, whether it is the change is degenerative or regenerative. So both are forms of changes that we see in the nature, whether in agricultural field or in organization level or in institutions or governance or any system or human engagement that we have. So the change is either in the direction of regenerativeness or degenerativeness. So that's the change that we see. That's the ontology that we know or observe. Now, how do we explain this? From this framework is the epistemology of this change can be explained through the science of interactions. So one of the axioms that I'm saying there, that interaction is the foundation to observing the change. And of course, what's the logic behind this? The logic is that everything is interconnected and interdependent. And when they interact, they produce change. So that's the basic structure of the methodology or the science of this methodology. Now, most scientific work do not or exclude the element of axiology. That is, what is the value base for undertaking or interrogating or investigating or finding a method or a solution to a problem? This often is left out. It is free of any values. Now, this AISS or STAR also takes the axiology into account, and that's where the intentionality shapes the kind of changes that you see. So there is an element of axiology or the value which is founded on intentionality. So AISS itself explains the methodological, the science behind the methodology. So that's broadly the starting point. But what is the first three are given in the nature. But when human beings enter into the ecosystem, into the habitat, then the element of intentionality becomes prominent. So I'm going to share a bit about what is this, how is this human intentionality constructed, which is a very dynamic systems construct that we see. And we spent, of course, these studies have been there for almost over 14 years or so. But in the last 3 years, we have intensified this work. Just finished a seminar on this, this idea of human intentionality. And I'm going to give you just one slide summary of how we understand intentionality. So intentionality is probably the core of human actions or human behavior. That's how it has been covered also in the literature. But this intentionality is shaped largely from these two perspectives. One is the level of consciousness, from a unitary level of consciousness or individual consciousness to a systemic consciousness. So that's one way of looking at how we become aware, how the mind becomes aware. And the other feature which shapes intentionality of human beings is the beliefs that a person has or grows into in the world of living, in the real life world, the beliefs that we have. Now, these beliefs could be not only a religious belief, but this could also be a rational belief. So it could be a belief from both perspectives. It's a theological or religious or even rational beliefs. So these are very strong. And what we found from the empirical studies from India as well as from around 30 countries data is that the beliefs are shaping more of the intentionality than the systems consciousness. In the real world of life, the beliefs are actually the stronghold of our intentionality. Now, when we look at this belief or consciousness, we see that the core of this is we find is interactions. So it is the interactions which is the basis of belief formation or systemic awareness. So the degree of interactions that we have. Now, the degree of interactions can lead to either degeneration or regeneration. So either way it can move. Now, what determines to move towards regeneration or degeneration are these three levels of beliefs. One is the belief on certainty of the real world. The second could be the temporal certainty, as you'll find quite a bit of this, very, very well expressed in the either if you look at Buddhism or Taoism or phenomenology in the field of philosophy. Phenomenology as well as existentialism, all these brings in this element of temporal certainty to uncertainty. So now we also go into the world of physics. We do find that the studies are showing that the elements of uncertainty of the nature, that's becoming clear. The double slit experiment with the first one, and then we have come down to looking at entanglement, the quantum entanglement that we see. So there is this, so depending on whether the belief is on certainty or uncertainty, either we get into degenerative mode or regenerative mode. So the foundation for regenerativeness, as per this framework, is that the reality is uncertain. It's evolving, and hence it is uncertain. So in that context, what is the nature or what is the position of the human entity is that it actually goes down to understanding that the nothingness of self, which one of the core arguments have been in the Buddhist thinking. So you can see that, so these are the foundations towards looking at regenerative. In fact, when we can get to that position of realizing the nothingness of self in the large complex system that we are operating, magic begins to happen. And that's where regenerative agriculture is one very good example, where because we can see these results very quickly. And the same principle works in other systems as well, other subsystems as well. But it's difficult to observe in the limited human mind because of the intentionality, which is oriented more towards individuality than relationality. So that's where the problem begins for the human mind. It is not able to recognize, even if it recognizes, is everyday life takes him or her more towards looking at certainty, looking at short term, looking at one's own immediate needs, and forgets the importance of the interconnectedness for the long-term gain of this individual. So this is where the mind struggles to figure out how to engage. And more often than not, it ends up into a degenerative mode than regenerative mode. But once we understand, I think we can begin to fix the problem better. So the methodology broadly, I'm going to go through it quickly. There are different methodologies that we have, different social methodologies. There are, of course, experimental methodologies in the pure sciences. And then recently we see there is transdisciplinary research which is coming in. And there are, of course, many more in between. And then there are other methodologies. And the methodology I'm referring to fit into the reality of uncertainty is the ecosystemic transdisciplinary action research. And now we can see this across on different dimensions, the orientation, the nature of reality, the purpose, the nature of data, and nature of data collection varies from one end to the other end of these different methodologies of thinking and doing. So if you look at orientation, on one end, we see it is more anthropocentric. The other end, it is ecosystemic. On the nature of reality, one looks at it being static, and the other looks at the element of evolving nature and uncertainty. On the issue of purpose, we see that one is more of problem measurement. On one end, we see it's more of measuring problem or diagnosis and knowledge seeking. On the other end, we are looking for problem solving or synthesizing or solution seeking. It also creates wonderful authentic knowledge. It's not that it doesn't create knowledge, but in the process of problem solving, we actually create authentic knowledge. So it includes both knowledge as well as solving problem. The nature of data on one end we see is mostly frozen in time and space. On the other end, it is evolving knowledge. It's not fixed. The nature of data is not fixed. It keeps evolving. And the nature of data collection, therefore, is at one end is ethic in nature, that you're away from the reality and then you go and collect data. On the other hand, you're part of the system and you keep collecting data. So there are different aspects of this spectrum of these different methodologies. And of course, it's a different, I've spent nearly, this is one subject which I have not stopped teaching since 2002. So almost 22 years I've been teaching this, and I fairly get a sense of how this works and what are the limitations and how do we actually make best use to solve problems. One is to understand the systems, diagnose the problem. The other is to solve the problem. So, of course, we need a combination of all this, but it depends on the architect how to mix and match and solve the problem. So, some level we need knowledge, some level we have to solve. So, this is how the whole body of methodology. But if you look at the ISSS philosophy and understand reality as an uncertain, evolving nature, then the most suitable methodology that seems to fit the bill is the ecosystemic transdisciplinary action research. So that's where it's all built or based around. So the ontology very well fits into, and therefore, as I already mentioned, the ontology, epistemology, logic, and axiology is drawn from ISSS. So this methodology is built on the ISSS philosophy of science. And so how do we actually, now we look at how do we actually operationalize this? When this is all right from the point of view of understanding the broad perspective, but how do we actually operationalize to make systems regenerate? So this is where the ISSS framework is designed or developed over maybe now is around 15 years specifically on this, but the work actually will go to about 30 years because it started with studying multinational corporations and then it went into many other fields. So let's see how this framework and quickly go through them. So before we get there, I'd like to first clarify what is an ecosystem, because we would like to see a framework which is not only applicable to my little village here in Orissa, but should be applicable in either in Australia or South Africa or Britain or elsewhere. So what is this ecosystem that we mean by in this regenerative ecosystem? So this ecosystem is nothing but is part of our physical world. So if you take the whole physical world, we can see this as our physical world. Now I'm going to concentrate on a particular piece. Let's say I take India, and within India, I will take my state, which I have been working on for the last over 20 years. So Orissa, and within Orissa, now I have districts. Now this is a unit. A district is a unit which is common across different parts of the world, which is a common unit across the world. Now, below the district, we have either 3 layers or 4 layers. In the case of China, it is 4 layers. In the case of India, it's 3 layers. So it can vary from, say, 3 to 5 layers. In Russia, it's a little different. But finally, it is between 3 to 5 layers that we, from the district to the local community level, that's around 3 to 5 layers. And this we did a study in 21, wrote a book on trying to understand across countries the institutional setup and the administrative setup, governance setup that exists. So now let me take you down from a district. The green color ones are the district. There are 3 districts. And in each district, there are 3 blocks. In the Indian context, that's how it works. So you have a district, then you have blocks, then you have panchayats or gram panchayats or wards that you have in Africa or in US. It may be parish in Britain. It may be, they have different names in different parts of the world. So the dark green one is a block. Now from this block contains gram panchayats. So every block would have around 12, 10 gram panchayats. Now, but this gram panchayat is also a human demarcated geography. It is not the ecological geography. It is a human demarcated geography. Now, let me take you further deep into, but this gram panchayat or ward is actually consisting of 2 to 3 ecologies or micro watershed areas. Now, this micro watershed area is the basis of all habitations in the world, on the planet. Every space is part of some micro watershed area. So there are drainage lines, underground drainage lines, and this makes life system in that habitat or geography. So if I take now this geography or ecology, now this ecology is one part, but there's not, where is the human habitat? Human habitat is formed around this ecology. And that's where the social dimension comes in, the political dimension comes in, and the economic activities comes in. So combination of all these 3 gets into the ecology and makes the economic activities take place in that, whether it is in a rural ecosystem or urban or industrial, is based on a particular ecology. Now, the problem that we have is, as Norma, you were mentioning, and we also heard from Gary that, yeah, ecology is fundamental, but the problem with this ecology is that there is an ecological imbalance. The ecological imbalance has created vulnerability in the other layers. And the economic one gets the biggest effect, though gradual, but has the biggest effect. And they go in that form. So ecological imbalance has created imbalance in social systems, in political systems, and economic. So this is where the struggle is. So the point then is, how do we actually, so this crisis is not just an imbalance, it's become a crisis. And in today's context, our global expenditure on dealing with this crisis of rising temperature and pollution across these three, water, soil, and air, as you all know, is in the tune of $1 trillion per year, which was a rise of 23% over last year. So the total GDP of the world is around 100 trillion. And currently our cost of dealing with this climate and temperature and pollution is about 1 trillion. Now that doesn't solve the problem at all. And if I was just trying to map it and see with an increase, it would not take more than 24 years to match up, because the GDP is growing at 3.8%, and the current data of our subsidies to deal with water, soil, air pollution, and temperature is around 1 trillion, and which is rising at 24%. So in around 24 years, they will just balance out at around $266 trillion. So we just have about limited time to actually match up with whatever GDP that we're having. So it is a crisis. Now, therefore, this ecology is so fundamental to building social, political, and our economic activities. So that's, I think, at the core of understanding of why we need to focus on ecology and build the ecosystemic transdisciplinary approach to solving our problems. So the data is there. The link is there, but I'll leave it there. So how do we resolve this is the main point. So here, when we have this problem of crisis in the human systems, we're saying, okay, how do we use or how do we create regenerativeness of ecosystems in this kind of condition? So that's where the ISSS framework is being applied. So now these 4 layers that I showed you actually has 8 specific dimensions. So the economic dimensions include agriculture, services, manufacturing, and organizations. So different forms of organizations. And then we have at the top of all these organizations MNCs. And MNCs is seeming to be the most damaging design, which destroys the rest of it. So you can see that the production or the economic activities are 4 layers, whereas the political dimension includes 2, governance and institutions. And the social is about relationships, which is where we were referring to relationality or individuality, which is linked to the intentionality of human beings. So that's another critical field. And then, of course, at the base of it is ecology. So we use this ISSS also to explain a lot of physics and chemistry and natural sciences, but I'm not going there at the moment. That's another 2 big, large papers, complex papers, but let's stay with just ecology, but it's applicable across. So from here, using this logical construct of regenerativeness in ecosystem, this is a logical construct. The application would become a little different, but this is a logical construct, which has both the ISSS philosophy and the STAR methodology. So you start with interactive systems design, let's say in agriculture. For instance, you do permaculture, which is part of an interactive system design in that system. But that has to be in sync with the organizational design, with institutions, with governance, and of course, following the principles of the nature with the ecology. So if they match up, then you create a regenerative ecosystem. Or if you get closer towards that, you set in regenerative cycles to make that possible. And that's how the regenerative ecosystem designs have been evolved. So this is presenting the whole set of factors and variables. There are 40 factors, and the possibilities of variables are infinite. I've just shown the spectrum of the variables. At the middle are the factors, and on the left and right are the 2 ends of the spectrum. But what we have seen through permutation combination is if I improve or if I give 4 options to each of these factors, then the number of permutation goes to infinity. So it also tells us that it's almost a losing battle to deal with this problem of degeneration. So, but we understand that the features on the right-hand side are all in line with regenerativeness and the philosophical foundation of nothingness. So there is a way out, but the current situation is that it's almost a losing war to really make it. But having known that it is possible, it is breaking down, and that it is also possible to do it, this is where the human coordination comes in. Large-scale human coordination and understanding of our human intentionality comes into place. And if you understand that, it's not difficult to reverse the process within a very short time. We see in agriculture, we are able to reverse the process at a maximum of 3 years. If you do it all well, you can reverse the process in the very first season itself. That's what we have experienced. And it's possible to reverse, but it is about human coordination and intentionality. So when it comes to actual implementation, we now break it as more reductionist. We see them as these are the 4 basic pillars of any ecosystem. To work on these so that the ecosystem services are in place. And then we get into the economic dimensions. The economic dimensions are, of course, primary production, secondary production, services, and organizations. So the design in each of these have to be different, or rather be carefully chosen, as I showed in the previous slide. There are different design features, but we have to be careful in choosing those design features to make regenerativeness possible. So when we get into a ecosystem, a ward or a gram panchayat, we have to simultaneously intervene on all these 8 dimensions. And that's where I was referring to, that getting governments to agree to do on small habitats, on workable. Of course, this gram panchayat is also arrived at by looking at the transaction cost and looking at the revenues, the optimization of transactions, optimization of economics, optimization of well-being at individual level, and of course, at a collective level. So it is taken into account all that and arrived at this optimal habitat, which is the case across the world. It could be in different names, but that's the lowest unit of governance in any country that one can think of, because ecology as such, without the human beings, will not be the way it is. So human beings are the most important intervening agency. So human beings taken with ecology has to be what's the design that we have to develop. So if I now take into practical situation, if I take this as a district, now the red one would mark a district. There are blocks, there are block headquarters, which you can see in the purple color. And the green boundaries are the clusters or habitats, which would typically in Indian context is around 2 to 3 watershed, micro watershed, or ecology that I was referring to. So that is what people identify as their boundaries. And therefore, we take an optimal boundary where people can recognize and work together. But that's the lowest unit of governance. So then there are, of course, many layers of working with it. But if we intervene on these 8, rather, you can say 6 here, ecology, relationships, institution, governance, these are the foundations. Then economics, you can take into production, economic activity, and organization. The production can be agriculture or manufacturing or services. They are all economic activities. If we intervene on all this, we can see that the problems of the world as captured by the SDGs can actually be dealt with multiple times. So it is possible to solve or get to sustainable development goals if we look at from this frame, and we'll achieve them many times more. And in around 6 to 8 years, you can actually solve the problem. If not at the global level, but at this habitat level, it is possible to solve. At a district level, it is possible to solve. Now, if that is a science that we can establish or an empirical evidence we can establish, I think governments, when they are running after their budgets, they don't have money to run the state, they would be compelled to look at this option. So they have not much time because most governments are becoming bankrupt. The cost of governance is increasing because of the nature of governance they have adopted. So we have adopted, just not they, we together have adopted these governance models, which are not going to sustain because we can see from the cost structures, they're becoming unviable. So in short time, they would come back to these ideas and accept to deal with the problems in just around 5 years or 7, 8 years. I think they will bend down to know what is the way to deal with in the future. So we see that we have estimated this. There's another paper just focusing on this. We have done the work on the field. We also see how the productivity goes up, the other things improves. So all the SDGs are clear indicators, except for 17 and 16 and 17 up to goal 15, they actually highlight the problems of the world, problems of the planet. And accordingly, the goals have been fixed. So they are all problem areas, and we can deal with these problem areas through this framework of ISSS. So based on this was the book. And of course, the book is a manifestation of some of these ideas. So the book, of course, is a manifestation of this regenerative ecosystem design, but most of the chapters are around interactive systems designs. That means they're dealt with some specific domain, for instance, agriculture, or they have looked at industrial production system, or they've looked at urban systems. So they've looked in pieces. So it's a more smaller subsystem that the book brings in, but it has this broad feature of the regenerative ecosystem design. So let me take you to the broad features. It has, of course, as I already mentioned, it uses the 8 dimensions and 40 factors. And of course, it is built on ISSS philosophy. And the chapter 1 describes the methodological issue. Chapter 2 gives the ISSS paradigm. And the part 1 of the book discusses other major issues and approaches to regenerativeness, whether you may call a circular economy, or you talk about ecological social systems. So there are many approaches that we have had. So the part 1 deals with all that. And then, of course, part 2, 3, 4, and 5 illustrates cases of regenerative systems in different ecosystems, whether it's natural ecosystems. There are 2 chapters. Rural indigenous, there are, I think, 4 to 5 chapters. Urban has 4 chapters. Industrial has 3 chapters. So we have different chapters for these different ecosystems. So the essence of it is it explains the science of change, and it provides a unique transdisciplinary ecosystemic framework. And I would also, with kind of some level of confidence, I would say that because I have been in touch with the best research centers on transdisciplinarity, there are gaps in that, in between what we say theoretically and how they practice. But this, of course, tries to fill that gap. And of course, through various cases from different ecosystems, it tells us the steps and processes to synthesize regenerative ecosystems. So it's a valuable reference, both for scholarship as well as for policy and practice. And I was also very happy to note that this idea of regenerativeness was recently discussed in the Commonwealth Nations office in London based on this book. And they have requested that we have a workshop for the members of the Commonwealth. So I think there is an attention, there is a need, and there is a realization that regenerativeness as a concept is to be better. We need to understand that better and put that to practice to solve the growing uncertainty and vulnerability that we encounter. So this is the book. And of course, the link I had shared before. This less than 3 months, it has reached, of course, since it is a Springer publication, it automatically goes to some of the best universities in the world. And then, of course, within these 3 months, there are around 2,232 downloads. So there's already cited, the book has been cited by the top system scholars, Arsene Ray and other colleagues. They have already written an essay in IFSR journal, and they have referred to this. So there is some attention to this book. So the book has all this. Of course, you can look at the book. I can share some chapters if necessary. It's a copyrighted book, but I wish it could be open source, but currently it's copyrighted. But I'm open source. So if anything, if I can be useful, I'm available to share. So broadly, this is the book. And of course, as a continuation, I welcome you to the next international conference on regenerative ecosystems that's being planned for November 2025. Both Gary and Norma, I would welcome you if you can make time. Dr. G as well. Look forward to seeing you at this conference as well. Of course, I will join you. I'll try to join you in your conference in Birmingham that Gary already mentioned. with that, I must thank you, and I hope I've taken longer, Gary.
No, that was perfect. And I didn't want to interrupt you at the 20-minute mark. I was really enjoying it. No, thank you so much. That was really great. I'm sure there's going to be some rich discussion now.